Hey guys, and welcome to How to Paint a Blight King. This is part one in a series where I'll be going through and showing you how to paint one, everything from the skin to the armor to the little dribbly bits that Nurgle loves so much. So yeah, let's get into it. So in front of me we have one of these Blight Kings. I'm not quite sure whether he's a character or not, but yeah, he's really cool. I think everyone's seen this online. We all know what this is, and so I'm going to have a crack at showing you how to do it. So in my previous videos for things like flesh and stuff like that, we have I use a lot of glazing and a lot of underpainting techniques for colors and so on, subsurface scattering below the skin, and we're going to be taking some of those ideas and bringing them across into an AOS Nurgle model. And with this one, we're going to, instead of, again, in my previous ones, if you go and have a look, I'll do things like a bone or cream zenithal and build up from there, but that's using an airbrush. So for this one, I want to do it without using an airbrush and build all of the volumes and all the tones simply and effectively with no airbrush. So this has been zenithaled over a black undercoat using Grey Seer from Citadel, and just very soft, so it's quite a greyish tone, not too bright. So we want to keep a lot of the black there. We're wanting something a bit darker and more grungy for this guy, so not too bright. It's just a light dusting and you'll get something like this. So that's how you can begin if you're going to follow along with this tutorial, and that's about it. That's where we begin. I'd also suggest doing the base like I've done, because that makes things a lot faster, but if you've got a different base in mind, that's perfectly fine. So let's get into the colors we're going to be using. So for this particular one, we're going to go for a pallid tone for his flesh. So it's going to have, I've chosen here this corpse pale for a few reasons. One, I have it in my box of colors, and two, it has red and yellow in it, and that's going to be great. And we also have this Grimnar purple from Army Painter, and we're going to use that as well to darken the color. And then we have some gray here. You could use any gray. I'm just using this one here from Game Color, and that's going to be used to control the saturation, like I've done before in previous videos, to desaturate a little bit if it gets too strong. And then we have some white here, just in case we want to throw a bit of white in for highlights and so on. And then for the armor, I just brought this across. We're not going to be using this today, but I thought I'd just bring it across here. We're going to be going for like a blue to green style. So that should be really cool, up to quite a bright green, like a neon green, hopefully. And the reason why I've chosen this flesh tone is because the yellow will contrast, you know, against the blues, and the reds that are in that are going to contrast against the greens. So you should get like a multi-layered, basically a nice vibrant contrast between the armor and the skin, and that's going to be what we're shooting for, something like that. So they should contrast well with each other. Even just looking at those colors there, they look quite pleasing against one another, and so that should work really well. So to begin with, in this first part, we're just going to be looking at building up essentially like a zenithal, like a base layer which has some light in it and some darks, but only really just concentrating on the one color, the one set of colors. So we're not going to be glazing in this particular part. We'll do that in the next video. So we're just concentrating on a couple of layers of tones, so from dark to light. And we're going to start with a little bit of this mixed in with the corpse pale, and then move up to this and maybe like a highlight on top. But it's going to be very simple. We're not trying to complete the skin in this pass. This is just to give us essentially what the spray is giving us here, but a slightly more refined version in the actual flesh tone that we're using. And this will allow us to then do our underpainting of the glazing, which is all of the colors under the skin, and then we'll go in and do our final pass, which will be all of the highlights and so on, and hue shifts on top of the skin, and that should be the final look. So yeah, I think that's where we'll begin. So let's get started. Alright, so I've got a larger brush in front of me. It's about I think a 2 or something like that, but you use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. So model on the other hand, we've got the paints already out here, and we're going to bring across some of this corpse pale, move it into this area here, bring a little tiny bit of this purple in, and we're just going to build a gradation of colors down to see what we sort of come up with. So, you know, that's not bad. we'll put a little bit of this here and see how that goes, how that blends together, and see if we can come up with a step that feels good. There we go. And just blend them together, adding a little bit more of the corpse pale in to brighten that up. Okay, so we've got a kind of step process here of where we're going. So to give you an idea of the recipe, it's going to be something like, I guess, not really 50-50, but it's more like 2/3 of the corpse pale with 1/3 of that purple, roughly, and that will get you somewhere around here. And then I guess a 50-50 is somewhere in the middle, and then, you know, the reverse, 2/3 of this, and I guess, well, no, probably less than that, probably like 3/4 and a little bit for the final, I guess, something like that. So possibly the bottom one is 50-50, and then 2/3, 1/3, and so on. But we've got it all here in front of us. I think this is a pretty good place to begin. Now we'll see how it goes on. We might add a little bit of grey into this just to desaturate it a little bit. So add a little bit of water to your chosen base shade layer, quite thin. And the reason why we want it quite thin is because we're going to try to utilize some of the zenithal that's already on our model. And that's going to be really helpful because it's going to already give you the lighting that you need and all of that stuff, and you don't have to go and really push super hard to get a result. So something like this, and we'll just test it and see how it feels on the model. It's also going to probably change some of the colors and so on. So this is coming on not too bad. Yeah, it's not too bad. I think we will though go a little darker. So just add a little bit more of this purple in, and maybe a touch of the grey. We'll just keep blending that across until you find the colour that feels about right. So there's no real recipe for this. This kind of approach is really great because it's letting you see like how colors interact with one another, and you'll find really interesting blends going on here that will really inform your skills for picking and choosing colors and mixing them. So we're just going to now base this up. I think this is a little better. Yeah, it's got a little bit more of that purple in there, not quite as pink, a little bit desaturated, and that's about what we want. So I guess for recipe we're looking at a blend of these two with a small touch of grey in it, and you're going to get this. And it's okay to use a few different variants. See how I'm grabbing from the middle now? That's perfectly fine. That's going to give you some subtle shifts of tone and colour across the surface, and that's perfectly okay. And we're just going to come through here and base coat this whole model. And you'll see as it dries, it will allow some of that darker black from the undercoat to come through, which will change the color as well. And also the brighter areas should be slightly lighter. And we're not trying to do like a super even coat here. It can be quite light and quite uneven, and not be totally, even a little streaky. That's all fine. This model is going to end up with quite a few layers of colors over the top, so that will all just go away by the end. You don't have to worry. So this is a very, very fast process. So I'm going to go do that now, and I'll be back in a second. Alright, so let's take a look. So I've got the base layer on, and as you can see, as I said before, when not to worry about like doing a really even coat, that black, those areas where it's a bit thinner or a bit blotchy, you get these really nice little bits of bluish purple coming through, and that's all really cool because that's going to help inform how you glaze it and what sort of colors you're going to put in there and stuff like that. So you end up with this nice sort of varied base. So now we want to put a bit more light on the model so that when we come to do the glazing steps and our final layers, we have a bit more, you know, definition, contrast and tonal range across the surface. So the light's coming from above, so we're going to mostly start to put, you know, the lighter layers on the top. So we look at the top, the belly there, and the top of the head and so on. What you're seeing there is pretty much all the areas that we're going to be hitting with the brush. Okay, just like as if you're using a spray can. So we're just going to build up some of that and get a little bit of light and dark happening, and then we'll just see what it looks like and go from there. But that's the process. So we want to probably move down a brush now to like a 1 or something like that. If you're confident and capable of using a larger brush at this stage, then by all means. We're just going to mix up some of this color, pull it in from next to where you've got it, and we're going to get this slightly off Corpse Pale color. So it's not quite as bright and vibrant as the Corpse Pale is. We're just going to make a slightly dulled version with a little bit of water, and now we're going to start to apply this. So we might even still be a little bit strong there. We might just add a little bit more of that dark in, and we'll see how it looks. So we'll start on the pectorals here, and just painting across, and we'll see how this dries. Again, it's quite a thin coat. Okay, just painting the top areas, leaving as much as you can the recesses, and we're not going to be painting into those little wounds or the entrails and all that kind of stuff. We're going to hit that with probably other colors, so we don't really need to paint those. They can stay as they are with just this base tone, and we're just going to come across and keep hitting this until we're happy. But I think that's going to be a pretty good base. Can you see there? Yep. And just following the contours of the skin, leaving some of those darks, you know, just very light little touches, almost little dotted movements, little feathering movements, just pushing that paint around and just seeing if you can hit all of the nice little, you know, folds of flesh that exist on a Nurgle model. It's one of those fun things. You can just sit here and lose yourself, you know, in the majesty of Papa Nurgle's blessings, and just keep on going around the model, and we're just going to hit that like that and give ourselves a nice little base. Now when you come across the dark side, we may not even really hit that. We might just, you know, come down and just sort of feather it across and streak it, and maybe even leave, you know, a bit of this dark side, that dark color. So you don't necessarily have to hit it all. So we're just trying to get a lot of the top areas. It's just to give us a tonal range. So one of the things about adding glazes or colors like that is that it works best when you've got some values. By that I mean dark to light across the surface. The glazing will work a lot nicer for you. You'll get more out of the glaze. So by that I mean the colors that change across the surface will be more varied and more interesting. If you don't have a lot of values hitting the model, then your glazing layers aren't really going to work very well. Just like as if you were using Photoshop and putting some sort of filter over the top of an image, it works better over a full image that has lots and lots of different values than, let's say, if you put a filter over white or black, like a pure white or black screen, you won't get any difference at all because there's nothing for the filter to interact with. So that's one of the things, and glazing works very much the same way. So I'm going to go through and just hit the top areas with this lighter tone, and I'll come back once I'm done. Okay, so let's have a look. There we go. So that's our first layer after the base layer, and we've got that light. Now I didn't even bother, if you turn this upside down like this, you can see all the underside is darker. I don't know if you can see that. There we go, you can see there. So the top has it, the underside doesn't. I didn't even touch that, I just left it as is. Same for the under part of the belly there. It's all super dark under there, and even under the hand. Okay, it's mostly just focusing on the top areas. Okay, and where I want that transition, I was just streaking it. So just light little feathering motions like this to sort of simulate, you know, cracked or leathery skin, that type of thing. So you get that kind of texture. You can sort of see it a little bit there in the shoulder muscle there, coming down into the bicep, that streakiness, and that's cool. As I said, once we do all these glazing layers, a lot of this is all going to blend in, and we're going to be doing final highlight layers over the top, which will mask any sort of, you know, harsh transitions or anything like that. But, you know, mostly you're looking at the model from this angle anyway when it's on the tabletop, right? So most of these kinds of details you're never going to see. So there's no point in wasting too much time obsessing over them. Just look for the focal point, which is this glorious belly. And we're going to be now adding a final highlight layer for this, I guess, base skin or zenithal skin layer. and we're going to focus most of our attention around this central area near the head, which is where we're going to be looking most, and a few of the raised areas, you know, around the lips of these you know, impressions where the skin is rotted away. We're going to add a little bit of highlight there, just like you would line highlight on a Space Marine or on a piece of armor or something like that. We're just going to put a little bit of highlight there, you know, just where the light would catch, you know, again looking at it coming from the top. Okay, use the light you have in your space that's actually like lighting your painting room, and see where that natural light hits the model, and you'll see little glints of light and shadows forming, and that's going to tell you where to put it, as well as the zenithal that we already had. If we look at the foot here, we can see all the light just hit the top, and this is all dark here with a little tiny bit of light hitting on this edge. That's the same thing we're trying to apply to this skin. So yeah, let's get started. So now we had that slightly desaturated version of the corpse pale. Now we're going to bring in a little more of that. We're not going to quite get to full corpse pale. It's going to have a little tint in it, but we're going to get to a much brighter level. And now we should start to be seeing a little bit of the yellow that's in this color. Little touch of water, still keeping it quite thin. Okay, we want it to dry a little bit washed out, a little bit thin. And now we're just going to see how this goes. So we're going to start with this central area where the focus is. You know, all Nurgle models, the true focal point of any Nurgle model is the belly. It's not the face, it's not the hands, no, it's not the weapon, it's not the armor, it's the belly. So we want to get a nice, glorious, shining belly happening. So we can please our papa and make him happy. So we get all the glorious boons, all the wonderful plagues that come your way when you're a follower of Nurgle, which they love. So we just come across there, and you can just see I'm lightly streaking it across, not being too worried about how it looks exactly, just trying to get a kind of streaky pattern. Because that will basically simulate that sort of rotted flesh look. You don't have to be perfect blends here. This isn't the final skin. This is just to establish our lights and darks. So I'm just going to go through and do that now, and I'll be back in a second. Alright, let's have a look. So there we are. We've got our base done. You know, got some nice darks under there. Got the lights on top. That focal area, the belly around the face, is all nice and lit. And anywhere where it transitions off into the dark, you can see I've just done those little streaky motions, just to give us a bit of texture in there. Okay. And now finally, just for one last little pass, we're just going to get, now it's like basically just corpse pale, mixed with a bit of white. A bit of water, and just off corpse, and we're going to just put just a little bit around this central area, and maybe just a few little spots here and there, and probably a little bit on the back of the head and just at the top here, probably nowhere else. So it's just that final little touch that you can do to further emphasize these lights and darks. So just popping it across the top there, little tiny feathering motions. Okay, nothing too crazy, just adding a little bit more light. And start by just doing that central area and seeing, you know, how it interacts with the rest. And if you feel you want a little more, then just add a little more. Like in some places I did like an extra layer on some of these areas just to intensify the color a little bit. And you don't even have to really, the beauty of doing that is that, you know, you can use the same color because it's going to be brighter than the one underneath because it's relatively thin, so it darkens. And so you can use the same color to get your highlight, and that's, you know, just efficient. You know, you don't have to be mixing any more colors or anything like that. You literally can use the same color. So that's the same with this here. If we find that the highlight isn't quite strong enough after it dries, we just re-hit it the same color, and you'll get a brighter color after it. So that's all we're doing, just adding a little bit of brightness there. Okay, and then I'll come back with the finish, and that should complete our first section of this tutorial. All right, I'll be back in a sec. All right, let's look at the finished result. And there we go. One sort of zenithal cream base skin tone done without an airbrush to give you everything you need to do your glazing steps and your final highlights. Really, really simple. We haven't used very many colors. We've literally gone maybe 4 steps. And just built on the raised areas. The beautiful thing about a Nurgle model is that they're so rotund and so rounded that you get a really good idea of where the light should hit. So this is like a really great way to practice these techniques. Now, if you were new, you could probably stop right here, you know, do your little dribbles and your little pustules and stuff like that, and the rest of the model, and you'd be very happy with this type of result if you were, you know, newer to these type of techniques. But if you want to try going a little further, then the next parts we'll be looking at glazing and adding different colors, which is really quite easy, and I would definitely recommend having a go at it, because it will improve everything and give you a little bit more contrast, some darks and lights coming through. And then obviously we're going to go through and do all of the final sort of Nurgle bits, all of the disease and so on. But you know, even just the next glazing step would be a pretty good choice, because that'll just help lift this model even more. But yeah, if you are new, this is a great place to stop and just complete your model. It hasn't taken very long. Literally almost as long as the tutorial itself, so quite fast. And you don't have to be super careful. This is a Nurgle model, you know. A Nurgle doesn't need to be super clean, so you can, that's why those streaky patterns really work on Nurgle models, because it just gives you that sensation of texture and you know, slime and dripping and all of the corrosion and all of those type of things that we associate with the Nurgle model. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's helped, and yeah, look out for the next one. It should be coming next week, and then the subsequent weeks after that we'll look at finishing the model. All right, well, enjoy your day, happy modeling and painting, and I'll catch you on the next one.